You are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Xi Jinping meeting with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. One can only imagine what he will be able to take from Donald Trump. Get ready for our, it's no longer going to be apple pie, ladies and gentlemen.
And this has never been translated into Mandarin so much.
Meanwhile, as a way of saying don't forget about us, North Korea sends a missile more or less towards Japan in the eve of this visit by the Chinese chairman. And is Trump Care 2.0 already dead? Seems that way. Tom Price is very scandalous. Another investigation launched over his incredibly lucky stock purchasing and legislative maneuvering.
Oh my, they synchronized again?
And the incredible lightness of being Donald Trump's son. Meanwhile, Gorka's been busy on Wikipedia and defending anti-Semites.
It's part of the war.
And Attorney General Sessions about to rewrite police reform agreements to basically say, don't worry about the reform.
Y'all boys do what you feel.
Steve Bannon no longer a part of the National Security Council. We will discuss perhaps the reasons why. Georgia may be one of them. Bernie Sanders introduces tuition-free college in the Senate. And yesterday was Equal Pay Day. And lastly, a federal court says that civil rights now include LGBT rights. Very important for work and may have major implications for housing fairness. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. An emailer wrote in the other day to say, hey, I'm a new listener. Who are the people in the room with you? We don't. The video doesn't flip around, and if we're listening via audio, we don't know. And so, on occasion, I'll make the habit of saying, "I'm here with Matt and Kelly when she's not sick, and and Michael when he's not sick. Only Matt and I don't get sick. Isn't that right?" Well, I get sick.
You take 4 to 8 weeks.
That's true.
So that's good for your immune system.
Well, supposedly.
And sometimes, frankly, I mean,
I had to take a nap this
You're
morning.
Always sick.
I was sleeping
the opposite.
when Michael got
When
here
you're
this morning.
sick, your reaction is, I gotta go in and talk about the things that upset me.
Yeah,
or it'll
that's
be
what I was
even
gonna
worse.
say. If a Sam is sick and nobody's there to hear about it, is Sam really
Well,
sick?
that's true.
No,
I
that's
mean,
the problem.
That's okay. Fair enough. I'll take that. And we should say we got an honoree Webby thing. Is that right?
Yes,
Is
that
it
is
a
correct.
real thing?
Yes, it is a real thing. There is a top 5. But the category is best host, so it's really you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Who is the best?
That's very kind.
And the episode that you won, then there's 5 honoree.
Who are the other 5 honoree? Do we know? I know Dan Pashman was one. Old buddy from Air America.
Didn't exactly
Bill
prepare me for
Simmons.
this.
Bill Simmons.
Lena Dunham.
Lena Dunham.
Not
And then those other 2 shows. I think one
Oh,
is one of those
one of
shows that
them
are going to
is
be
the-
on Saturday.
Yeah, it's the one that is our double billing.
I wonder, is there some way we can go head to head with them?
What? No.
Well,
like
I mean,
a
we're
fight?
tied for honoree. Yeah,
Like a Podfest fight? No, I don't think we're
volleyball.
set up for that.
something like that.
Oh,
Battle
like-
of the Bands type
okay.
of thing.
Yeah.
All right. So
Well,
listen,
anyway, Sam won an honoree for that, and
it's like a consolation prize.
no, it's not a consolation prize
Basically
because
like
there's
the
a ton of
NIT.
people
You
who
don't get a prize.
didn't get anything.
that?
It's like getting a
NIT.
trophy for participating.
What was it?
No.
Which episode was it?
It was he was interviewing Guy Lawson about Justin Trudeau.
Okay, so that's it. We're going to say Webby honoree. I like the way they do that because it sounds like you won, right? Like you've been honored by the Webbies.
You came in at the top. You're not eligible for to actually win the top 5.
Well, we don't have to get so explicit.
They haven't actually won that award.
I was
either.
aiming for an honoree thing, and that's what I won.
I'm happy
I
with
won the honoree.
with the results, and I think that I
All right.
figured out how we're gonna win next time. So
Oh, okay. It's all rigged. All right. So speaking of rigged, by the end of this week, Neil Gorsuch will probably be approved to the Supreme Court of the United States. But en route, we will see the demise of the filibuster as it pertains to Supreme Court justices. You'll recall Harry Reid, faced with unprecedented obstruction by the Republicans. At one point, you'll recall, they so refused to seat any justices on the D.C. Circuit Court, the second most powerful court in the country. This is the one that dealt with all the administrative law that determines whether or not the EPA can go forward with certain regulations, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't even want to give the court its full complement of justices because there was a majority of Republicans on there. So they were like 4 or 5 justices shy. And at that point, the Democrats, they had been kicked around, slapped around for so long that they finally said, okay, we're done with the filibuster when it comes to courts that are subsidiary to the Supreme Court. And 2, with appointments to the administration, because 2 years in, the Obama administration still couldn't get fully staffed because the Republicans were doing everything they could to obstruct. That changed. Certainly, Donald Trump got the benefit of that by putting in basically a bunch of Mickey Mouse people, more or less, into his cabinet. And to the extent that he's trying to fill these other seats, which apparently not interested in. But now we're on the brink of Mitch McConnell pulling the nuclear option and getting rid of the filibuster. Last night, Jeff Merkley held the floor of the Senate overnight to oppose Neil Gorsuch. Let's hear from him. This is a compilation.
The majority team in this chamber decided to steal a Supreme Court seat. Again, such a theft never, ever has happened in the history of our nation. The majority said, we intend to pack the court of the United States of America. There was no principle to the position. It was a warfare tactic of partisanship to pack the court. It was a end justifies the means, even if the means violates the core premise of the Constitution and does deep damage to the Senate and does deep damage to the court.
So they have now reached the filibuster threshold. I think we still may have a couple of votes extant. I'm not sure if we know how everyone is voting, but as of now, I think there's only 3 that have announced, 3 Democrats that have announced that they will vote against the filibuster. I may be off a little bit on my numbers right now, but which is interesting in and of itself, because the way something like this usually works is that your leader will say, I will release you and allow you to vote against what we want. If they know they have the votes, and if a particular senator or congressperson feels that this would put them in jeopardy for a reelect, that it's contrary to what their voters want. So I'm surprised. I mean, Heidi Heitkamp, a huge Trump win in her state. Joe Manchin, same thing. I mean, I don't particularly appreciate these people as Democrats, but I'm not terribly surprised. But there are others who I thought would not want to make this vote, and I think it shows, at least in this narrow area, that the Democrats are, at the very least, being cohesive. And I think there's a argument that you could just make like Jeff Merkley, like this seat was stolen, we're not participating, period. But they have also gone as far to say that Gorsuch is, consistently rules against people in favor of corporations in power. And I like that critique. So we will know. The vote is scheduled, I think, right now for Friday. And I bet it's going to be Friday evening because they've got to get out of town, I think, at the end of the week. We're all going on vacation next week. I'm spending some time with Senator Cornyn, and we're going hunting together. I'm joking. That would be pretty funny, though, right? I mean...
Hi, Senator Cornyn. Can we go shoot animals together?
Right. Well, the idea is that, like, I can go and do my show, but just like the Gipper and
some Jewish guy you hunted with?
No. And Tip O'Neill could go have a drink afterwards. I can do my podcast, and then
then you should go shooting with Alex Jones.
Oh. Well, yeah. But
you know what I mean? If you want to do the media equivalent.
Right. I guess that's...
Matt and I will be socializing with Jesse Waters.
There you go. Hang out. And
actually, that sounds so
You're going to go out and rate girls, right?
9. Yuck.
So,
no, get to...
that was a joke. That was a joke.
It was the old joke thing.
That was a really good joke, Sam.
When was the last time you've been to a library? Surrounded by an infinite number of options, all on the shelves, Dewey Decimal System. You go and look at the card catalog. That was the last time I was in the library. But now imagine that for comedy without all the shushing and be quiet. With CISO, you get unlimited access to CISO Original Series, British comedy, hilarious stand-up specials, binge-worthy classics, including 42 seasons of Saturday Night Live, the entire Monty Python catalog, the IT Crowd, and more. Yeah, I'll tell you something. It is worth it just to go back and watch the Albert Brooks shorts in those first years of Saturday Night Live. You like 30 Rock and Parks and Rec? How about new episodes of your favorite late-night TV the day after they air? Whatever makes you laugh, CISO has something in its library just for you. There's even new content added all the time. This month, you can watch UK imports like The Darkest Universe, Steve Coogan's Saxondale. It's all your favorite comedy, all on demand and ad-free. Do not tell me that you're a comedy nerd and you do not have CISO. That's all I'm saying. And you ready for the punchline?
Always. I'm a comedy nerd.
CISO is just $3.99 per month. No joke. This is the best offer you'll find. It's all in the delivery.
Yes.
It's $3.99. What?
What's the
What's
deal?
with the deal with the 99?
Why 99? Why not 98?
Well, how come they don't just say 4? We all know it's $4. I don't want that penny. But even if it was $4, ladies and gentlemen, still a great deal. You can even get 1 month free when you go to CISO.com, SEESO.com. Use the promo code MAJORITY at checkout. That's 1 free month of Laugh Your Ass Off comedy with the promo code MAJORITY. That's CISO, SEESO.com, promo code majority.
I remember one time when Waz was on in studio, and I did the you're a comedy guy, right, Waz? And he not really. Thank you for the transition.
All right, I don't know how much Michael talked yesterday about the alleged gas chemical attack in Syria. Right now, the UN Security Council is meeting to discuss the situation there. I know there are members of this audience who are quite convinced that this is all a false flag operation drummed up by white helmets.
Some of the same actors involved who were at Newtown, of course.
And actors. But it certainly appears, and this is according to a UK-based monitoring group, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, maybe they're wrong, that 20 children and 52 adults were killed in a chemical incident in Khan Sheikhoun, in the Idlib province. Now, Russia apparently is objecting to the draft resolution on the chemical weapons death in northern Syria. Their argument is that civilians were poisoned by rebel weapons on the ground, which were exploded. That explanation has been widely rejected.
Wait, so in other words, there was a Syrian Air Force strike that was conventional weapons, and then they hit a depot of chemical weapons that were being held by terrorists? That's what Russia's saying?
Not necessarily chemical weapons, but an area where there would be chemicals.
Okay. Makes perfect sense.
I guess possible, highly unlikely.
Yeah.
But, and here's the point. Obviously, the Obama administration did not have a terribly successful Syrian policy. But I contend that there may never have been a successful Syrian policy possible for this country. There are some wars, some things that happen around the world that we don't have the ability to fix by virtue of being the United States. I suspect that we probably armed some members of the resistance whom we regret to a certain extent at this point, perhaps, but I don't believe that we did so massively. And of course, to the extent that Obama drew this red line, there was supposedly a deal to get Syria to stop using these. They had not used them in the 4 years since that incident. And here's the point. Now, again, this is an alleged attack. We don't know. But having an actual State Department, having actual professional, experienced diplomats is really, really important, and probably more important than lay people like ourselves can understand. Because the smallest nuance in what is said and done on an international level reverberates in a way that I just don't think that we can fully understand and appreciate. These are very sensitive situations. So, as reported, a week ago, Tillerson was in Ankara.
Ankara, yeah.
And I don't know if there was any reporters who were allowed to actually go there. But here's how CNN reported on it. U.S. signals openness to Assad staying put. The Trump administration doubled down on Thursday on prioritizing the fight against ISIS over ending the Syrian civil war and getting rid of its main protagonist, President Bashar al-Assad. suggestion that was swiftly criticized by hawks on the Hill. Now, understand, this is probably not terribly different in practice from what the Obama administration policy was. But when you talk about emphasis, when you signal a shift just in your rhetoric, even if it doesn't imply that you're going to do anything different, it may imply that you will not, that your threshold for acting has changed. As they write, indicating a possible shift in U.S. policy on the war in Syria from the days of the Obama administration. That's the point. These things are so nuanced that you can't clearly say this is a clear break from. It's indicating a possible shift. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said on a trip to Turkey that the, quote, longer-term status of President Assad will be decided by the Syrian people. So that implies the U.S. doesn't have a desire to see him go. Now, there's a difference between having a desire to see him go and saying, we have such a strong desire that we're actually going to participate in getting him to go. And then there's like probably a half a dozen other sort of functional positions you can take in between those two things I just said. These are shades of gray, ladies and gentlemen, and we don't know.
But that's how diplomacy happens.
That's the point.
Right, in shades of gray. Yeah.
That's the point. Nikki Haley told Wire reporters last Thursday, our priority is no longer to sit and focus on getting Assad out. In other words, we're not even going to think about it anymore. Do we think he's a hindrance? Yes. Are we going to sit there and focus on getting him out? No. Now, we don't know if this change in policy, or at least the change in the threshold in which to do something about Assad, then gets translated to Assad as like, maybe I can get away with some more stuff than I thought I could.
I think that's clear. And just the other implication, too, is that this is pretty similar in practice to what Obama was doing functionally but not saying, like you're saying. But the other difference is that there was a failed but somewhat of a diplomatic process happening, which we kind of were letting Russia basically lead. And you could get to a scenario where you could basically say, like, the Alawites, the groups that Assad supposedly represents, are going to be protected and part of any power sharing agreement. But maybe he specifically and people around him, just as other factions that have committed war crimes, maybe they're not going to be part of an end scenario. I mean, that's another shift when you start specifically saying this guy specifically can stay versus the interests that he represents will be taken care of.
Right. The piece goes on to say if the U.S. does definitively abandon the policy of requiring Assad's departure, a position articulated by the Obama administration, it will put its policy closer in line with Russia, which supports Assad, and at odds with allies in Europe and Turkey, where Tillerson downplayed frictions that are already straining that alliance. The point being is that we don't know if these completely inexperienced, freshly minted diplomats, one of whom had great familiarity with the world from the perspective of someone who wanted to extract resources from specific places, and one of whom, speaking of Nikki Haley, who closest diplomatic, I think, deal was to get the rebel flag down from the South Carolina State House. We don't know if they meant to signal something like this. We don't know if this was taken by Assad, and we don't know what they're going to do now. So, just have an awareness that this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. I don't know what else to tell you beyond that. Their response to the North Korea missile test was what looked like a joke at first to me. It's basically, I don't have it right in front of me, but it was basically North Korea fired a missile, and we don't want to talk about North Korea anymore.
Yeah, I mean, after what Tillerson said last week or 2 weeks ago, which was incredibly belligerent, now they're completely backing off it. Also, I mean, I know it goes without saying that obviously Trump has no idea what he's talking about, but when he tells like the Financial Times, like it's about China with North Korea, that's true. But then it's like, well, the incentive structure is, I think there's some things on trade we can do. That has nothing to do with China's concerns about North Korea or anyone's concerns whatsoever.
You don't think they're having complicated trade relations?
I don't think so. I think that they're pretty concerned about a united Korea being in our zone of military influence. And I think they're also concerned that if North Korea collapses, they'll have millions of refugees crossing into their border.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah.
Whatever.
All right, fine.
Okay,
just send
fine,
Jared there.
fine. Okay.
Whatever he says.
Jared,
Go to North Korea.
take care of it.
Where's Ivanka?
There you go. So just be conscious of that stuff. And
That was one of the first times that I don't know. I know it goes without saying that he has no idea what he's talking about, but it's like with something like North Korea, there actually is this really specific, dangerous balance to it, and then having people that clearly have no idea what they're doing.
okay, boring, boring.
Who brought in the fag? No one cares. Look, we will nuke you and your little commie chopsticks. How about that? Or we don't talk about it.
All right, this is pretty fascinating. You've heard me talk about what's going on in Georgia's 6th District, right? This is where Tom Price left his congressional seat, which he won by 20 percentage points, where there is a jungle primary. There's, I think, 13 people running. If one person gets over 50%, they will become the congressperson from there. Otherwise, the top two people go into a runoff. There is a very strong Democratic candidate in a very unlikely seat for that candidate to win, a guy named John Ossoff. He has raised over $3 million. He is a young guy. And politics are pretty good even from a progressive standpoint. It remains to be seen what happens when a guy like this gets into office. This is like sort of purely a partisan play. And, for a seat like this, that's the best you can expect. The implications of this seat, if he wins, again, unlikely, but possible. Certainly possible he can get into the runoff, and then he probably would lose. But who knows? But if he wins, it would be like an earthquake, because it would completely fracture to the extent that there's any cohesiveness in the Republican Party now, which it appears there's not. It would completely fracture it even more. And for the past couple of days, we've heard reports starting with Rand Paul coming off the golf course saying that Donald Trump's ready to wheel and deal on Trump Care 2.0. Apparently, it's fallen apart again. And here is some reporting from the Axios. Mike Pence and House Republicans are supposed to meet again after talking for 2 hours late last night and not getting closer to a deal. Conservatives want to get rid of more Obamacare insurance regulations, including the ones dealing with pre-existing conditions, and other Republicans really don't want to do that. So a bill that was not conservative enough for the Freedom Caucus, but too harsh for the non-Freedom Caucus. Because, and look, before you even for a moment contemplate like, oh, you mean there are some Republicans who actually care about human beings? And look, I'm sure there are some. I'm sure some are good people.
I mean, I don't know.
I'm sure some are good people. But But the difference between the Freedom Caucus and these others really has more to do with how wide a margin did they win their district? How red is their district? That's why you will find more of these people from places like Alabama. And this has been largely a White House-driven show, and House Republican leaders, this is my favorite part, started to realize early yesterday that the emerging compromise probably would have lost more votes than it gained. They're going backwards, ladies and gentlemen.
Sometimes you got to go backwards to go forwards. That's what Tony Schwartz I wrote in The Art of the Deal.
You got to break some eggs to make some omelets.
Anyways, that's what the Mexican woman who makes my eggs says for me.
And that's mainly because of a proposal which lets states drop the rule banning insurers from charging higher rates to sick people. If that passed, insurers could price sick people out of the market even if they technically offer them coverage. Well, you have access. It's just that you need to be a millionaire to take advantage of that. So they are going backwards on this. And what's fascinating is for the first time ever, 55% approve of the Affordable Care Act. That's up from 42% right after the 2016 election. It has gone up 13% over the last 4, 5, 6 months.
Allahu Akbar, I believe is the phrase you're looking for.
40% want to keep the law but make significant changes. I would bet to the left.
To the left.
Right?
To the left.
It's not like people are out there going, oh, yeah, no, I want to make it 25.
I've come
When your child is
around
25,
on the ACA, but I don't really like the idea of my kids staying on my insurance.
I would like to bring back those risk corridors because I just think that we're starving, the innovation ability of insurance. No, 30% still want to repeal, and those are the classic dead enders. 26% want to keep the law as it is. So you've really got, something like, wow, I mean, that's just crazy.
Doesn't it? I mean, look. Well, you have another point before
I have
we
another
converge.
point.
Sorry, go ahead.
So Sarah Cliff from Vox, she goes and she does a focus group with Obamacare enrollees who voted for Trump. Okay? And they wanted to get a sense of what these people thought about the Affordable Care Act. Probably like, did you know it was Obamacare? Blah, blah, blah. This is in Pennsylvania, right? And apparently one of the Trump voters said, just sort of casually, we'd be better off if we had the healthcare system like Canada's. And so they said, well, how many people here would want a single-payer system? Something like Canada's. And half of the hands shot up in this focus group of Trump voters. Now, she goes on to write that polling research finds that conservatives seem to be gravitating more and more toward the idea of universal coverage. A January poll. Now, that's different. But the only way to achieve that really is single payer. Universal coverage just means that everybody gets covered by hook or by crook. But really, hook and crook are not going to be enough. A January poll from the Pew Research Center found the share of Republicans who think the government ought to make sure all Americans have health coverage has increased 19%. From 19% in March of 2016 to 32% in January 2017. That's pretty amazing. The voters I've interviewed like the idea of everybody getting equal treatment no matter where they live or how much they earn. In other words, I don't like black people in Philadelphia getting free coverage through Medicaid and not me. And put aside the racist sentiment. Why shouldn't everybody get health care? They generally talk a lot about fairness, something that Kathy Oler, an Obamacare enrollment worker who voted for Trump, brought up to me when I met her in Kentucky. I live in southeastern Kentucky. I think we need to be like the Canadians and all pay a certain amount. Some of this idea seemed to grow out of resentment for poor Americans who had enrolled in Medicaid and didn't pay premiums, while slightly more well-off people had to spend their own money on the exchanges. I mean, again, I don't know if those people would be happier if they assumed that all those other people are getting free health care through Medicaid are white. But I imagine the general sense among people is, hey, I'd like to get free health care.
I also just think that the not that anybody who voted for Trump, to be blunt, just through the action of being willing to vote for him, there's at the very least some racial blind spots. But on the other hand, I have no doubt that the people who really, the cluster of people who just have an innate problem with any type of delivery of public services because it would benefit people of color, that's in the 25%. That's in the Den group.
Well, I mean,
that's not in the maybe we should have a Canadian system group.
Oh, no.
Those
and
are
I
not
would
those
also
people.
say, look, the vast majority of people, the vast majority of people, and I don't know, I haven't seen, I think we still need to see the voter files on this. But if the number was any less than 80 to 90%, I would be shocked. And I have a feeling it's probably closer to 95% of the people who voted for Donald Trump voted for Mitt Romney and
Yes.
or John McCain.
Yeah, they're Republicans.
And or George Bush.
Right.
And or George Bush before then.
So, sorry.
I mean, what we're talking about is a small band of people, but putting aside that for a moment too, you know who else wants single payer in even greater numbers than half of the Trump voters?
Democrats.
People who voted for Democrats.
People who do this thing called voting for Democrats.
So the
this
point
thankless task.
The point is that you can look at this as as just simply a question of like, what is a good political strategy? Or you could also look at this as like, hey, that policy that we've always been told, which is, unimaginable and way out of reach, maybe it's not so much. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't remind people that means taxes are going to go up. But it also means out-of-pocket costs are going to go down further. That transition's not an easy one to make. But we just went through a fairly uncomfortable transition with the Affordable Care Act. And, 7 years later, 5 years later, 3 or 4 years later, people are starting to go, hey, some of that was actually pretty good. Now, here's a report that from the Medscape Physician Compensation Report 2017. A couple of things just to keep in mind. Physician salaries average $294,000 per year. We are all leaving this office to go to med school. But, of course, I would imagine, too, the loans are extraordinary. Though specialists typically earn about $100,000 more than primary care doctors, is according to an online survey completed by 19,000 physicians representing 26 specialty areas. The survey found that doctors in less populated states may make more money than those in some urban areas. Physicians in North Dakota can earn $361,000, Matt. Look at you. Boy, did you make a mistake,
with the cost of
buddy.
living, you can get a lot there.
For $360,000, I feel like you could retire on that.
You can buy
in
a
North
few
Dakota.
counties.
Alaska, $359,000. Now we understand that whole Northern Exposure show. South Dakota, $354,000. Nebraska, $346,000, while those in the nation's capital reported some of the lowest compensation, $235,000, followed by Maryland at $260,000. That probably boils down to supply and demand. Survey found that regardless of salary, 41% of primary care doctors and 33% of specialists believe they should earn more. And some, including women and black physicians, are earning less.
Surprise, surprise.
According to the survey, which found that African American and black physicians earn 15% less than white physicians.
What? 15?
Yeah. In 2016, only 7.5% of physicians and surgeons identified as black or African American. That's according to a Bureau of Labor Statistics. But don't black physicians, they get a big break on their loans, right? Don't they get that? I'm joking. Male physicians make more money than female physicians.
Surprise, surprise.
But the pay gap is narrowing among younger physicians. According to the survey, male physicians who are 55 to 69 make 27% more than women, but that pay gap shrinks to 11% in physicians under 34. While it's hard to decipher what's leading to the shrinking pay gap, historically have more often accounted for lower paying specialties than male physicians. And I want to talk about that too, just in the wake of Equal Pay Day. One of the things you hear morons say is that the reason why women make less money is because they make different choices that cause them to make less money. Now, you are probably well aware that women make somewhere between 77 and 79 cents for every dollar a man makes. Whether the same work schedules, and even smaller percentage is for women of color. Critics, this is a hat tip to Bryce Covert, who wrote this piece back in, I guess, a year ago. Will say that the raw gap doesn't show you. That's just because there's a bunch of choices that women make. If you take into account education, experience, race, industry, and occupation, the gap gets smaller. If women and men with similar characteristics are compared, women make just about 90% of what men make. And women do stay home with young children at higher rates than men. And she writes, so if women want to earn equally, then it should stand to reason that they should simply get more education, add experience to their resumes, choose high-paying industries and jobs, and stick with their careers. But the idea that women choose lower-paying work may put the horse in front, behind the cart. Because every time women begin to dominate a profession, the pay goes down. And every time men end up dominating a position, the pay goes up.
Yeah,
Women make less than men in every industry, even for work that's remarkably similar. Low-wage jobs dominated by women pay just 3/4 of what low-wage jobs held pay by men. Housekeepers, or mostly women, make 17% less than people who clean vehicles and equipment, mostly men. Cashiers make 10% less than parking lot attendants, men. High-paid female-dominated jobs pay about 2/3 of what male-dominated paid jobs. A study looking at a century of census data found that when the share of women in a particular occupation increases, the pay drops. When women took over working in parks and camps, wages fell 57 percentage points. 34 points in designing, 21 points in housekeeping, and 8 points in biology. By contrast, computer programming used to be done mostly by women. When men took over, prestige rose alongside with pay. Employers simply value work less when it's done by women. So, Kelly, just do your little YouTube thing there.
So you're dragging down all of our wages, Samantha.
What's that?
Nothing. Do you think, I wanted to ask on the healthcare question, on the healthcare front, do you think that,
I want them to try again. I think this is, wait, let me add one more thing. This is where I was going with this whole healthcare thing with Georgia, and I almost forgot about it. My understanding is, and I think there's been some reporting to this effect, there's certainly been reporting that Bannon has been watching what's going on in Georgia carefully and with increasing distress. Olivia Nuzzi had a piece on that Georgian race. And apparently Bannon, via text, said that he's been watching that race closely and that there's an aide whose basically job is keeping an eye on, following the polls. This is what the official said. It's something I'm tracking specifically for Bannon. Keeping an eye on, following the polls, following the kind of narrative out there. So it's definitely something we're paying attention to and the political department's paying attention to as well. I'm not convinced that the Bannon thing isn't, the national security thing isn't a question of like, hey man, maybe you should, maybe you're spread too thin here. Jared can just be on the National Security Council and maybe you could just focus on our domestic political situation. But I've also heard that the reason why the White House is trying so hard to do this repeal and replace is because Bannon is afraid that that 30% that I quoted in that poll that wants it repealed, those are the people, the relationship between that 30% and the people who come out and vote for a Republican on a special election in Georgia is probably as close to 1-to-1 as you can get. And so I think he's concerned that the failure to even be able to say that we've repealed Obamacare, even if they didn't do it, even if it was just in the process, I think is hurting them. And they're very worried about Georgia. And that's what I think is going on here.
and that's the audience he knows.
Do we know what those people look like though? Like, or like
white.
what they're, well, I mean, like, are they wealthy enough to, they don't care about Obamacare at all. They've been immune to that rise in popularity.
Well,
like,
most of them are, they're Republicans. They're going to be better off financially overall. I just have to come in. I did want to follow up on some things with healthcare. Hopefully we can get to it in the front half, but I have to say, I have to read this because this just came out. In the process of an interview where Trump is, of course, saying that Susan Rice may have committed a crime and is back on that whole beat, he then commented on Bill O'Reilly. I think he's a person that I know well. Classic Trump opening. He is a good person, said Mr. Trump, who during his interview was surrounded at a desk by a half dozen of highest-ranking aides. I think he shouldn't have settled. Personally, I think he shouldn't have settled because he should have taken all of that away. I don't think Bill did anything wrong. There you go.
He would never do anything that I wouldn't do.
Like the most damning statement in history, right? Like, I think when I look at Bill O'Reilly, the notion that he would do anything to women that I wouldn't do is just ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. Totally unfair.
Do we know how many advertisers now have jettisoned?
More than 20.
More than 20. That's amazing. Because that doesn't stop. When he has this
factor
acceleration. Tonight, I bet you he's going to be half in the back. He's going to be angry.
I'm going to be pretty angry.
Always half in the back. What are you talking about?
3/4 in the
Maybe.
bag.
All right.
Sometimes I'm cheery when I lure a contributor and compel her to have sex with me. I have a few less drinks. And other times they have an ugly person, they say no, and then I'm in a bad mood.
Hey, folks, MR Spring 17. MR Spring 17. What am I saying? I am saying the code that will get you 30% off Just Coffee. You've always wanted to try it. Is it worth it? Will I like it? I don't know. Maybe it's going to be too expensive for me to try. I mean, it's the same price as just about any other coffee I would buy if I buy, quality coffee, because that's what I'm into. But if I don't get a chance to try a cup of it, is it worth it? 30% off. 30% off, free shipping. 30% off, free shipping. MR Spring, justcoffee.coop. C-O-O-P. Why does it say .coop? Because it's a co-op. The people who work there own it. They fair trade coffee, tea, chocolate. Everybody gets a fair wage. And you can get the Majority Report blend. Yes, you can finally try it. JustCoffee.coop. Also, your membership makes this show possible. Become a member today. Join themajorityreport.com. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard about what's going on with YouTube right now. YouTube is demonetizing a ton of videos. We just got the list today. It was massive.
Well, to be fair, our list of over the course of the life of the show,
we have more videos.
We have a massive amount of videos.
Yes. But the point being is that, and maybe you've read about this, I guess advertisers were concerned. They wanted keywords. I don't know how they go about doing this, but when we talk about politics, that begins to undercut our ability to make money on YouTube. Now, I have never perceived this show as a YouTube show in the way a lot of other people perceive their show on YouTube. This was born as a radio show and a podcast, and in many respects, it still is. You know, I mean, we do stuff visually sometimes, and but we don't do the show in the same way that other YouTube shows do. We don't put all our content. We don't do our content exclusively for YouTube. With that said, that's why we have the model that we have, which is our members come first, because our members are never going to say, hey, we all got together and we don't appreciate the fact that you raised the fact that Gorka is an anti-Semite. Or we don't like the idea that you're talking about race or Black Lives Matter. Or we don't like the idea that you're criticizing Monsanto just because Donald Trump decided to tell the EPA to stop digging into what could be killing people. And so we're going to stop funding you. That doesn't happen with our members, and that's why our members, that's why this show is designed to rely on its members. So if you do have the financial means to support the program, join themajorityreport.com. And as a way of saying thank you, we give you bonus material. More than even the free show we give you. And then
we just go in the second half and we go, thank you very much. Okay.
Over and over.
Bye.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. 646-257-3920. Getting ready for that live MR show Saturday. People coming in. What? Why? What?
Sounds good. I'm glad to hear you're getting ready.
I'm getting totally psyched. I'm going to take a nap first, though. All right, we'll be back in just a minute.
He said